This was the greatest irony of the age of sail, the defining terror for every soul who dared the open ocean, to be adrift in a desert made of water. For pirates chasing treasure, navy men enforcing empire, and merchants hauling cargo, this wasn't just a nightmare scenario. It was a mathematical certainty lurking on every voyage. Your ship could be sound, your food plentiful, your crew brave. But if you lost your water, you were already dead. This is the story of how they fought that battle. Welcome to Factoscribe. Forget the Hollywood romance for a moment. The true currency of the golden age of piracy, the real treasure aboard every vessel from a Royal Navy frigate to Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge, wasn't pieces of 8 or silver bars. It was this: fresh water. And from the moment a ship left sight of land, a cruel clock started ticking. A clock counting down to the moment the last cask was broached. This was the brutal truth they all lived with. They were engaged in a continuous, losing battle against thirst. Victory wasn't about staying hydrated. It was about staying just hydrated enough to function for one more day. So why is this beautiful blue water a death sentence? It seems counterintuitive. The answer is in our own biology. Your kidneys are masterful filters, but they have a limit. They can only produce urine that is less salty than seawater. To flush out the massive salt load from a mouthful of the ocean, your body would need to expel more water than you just drank. It's a catastrophic deficit. Your body, in a desperate attempt to dilute the salt, starts robbing water from your own cells. This is osmosis in a death spiral. You don't just dehydrate, you hyperhydrate with poison. The process is viciously fast. Crippling cramps as muscles lose fluid. Mental confusion, seizures, kidney failure within days. Drinking seawater doesn't quench thirst, it multiplies thirst. It turns your body against itself. Now, let's scale this personal horror to an entire crew. Take a modest pirate vessel with 150 souls aboard. The bare minimum to stave off severe dehydration? About 1 gallon of fresh water per man per day. That's for drinking, and a tiny bit for cooking the rock-hard salt beef and weevil-filled biscuit. Do the math. 150 gallons. Every single day. That's over 1,000 gallons a week. A typical Atlantic crossing to the Caribbean could take 6 to 8 weeks. You are looking at a need for 8 to 12,000 gallons of fresh water for one voyage. 12,000 gallons weighs over 100,000 pounds. 50 tons. That's the weight of a main battle tank, stored entirely in wooden barrels. This was the single heaviest, bulkiest, and most critical cargo on any ship. A leak in the powder room could blow you to splinters, but a leak in the water hold, that was a slower, more terrifying fuse. It condemned you to the very fate you see all around you. Every captain, pirate or lawful, knew this. You weren't just sailing to a destination. You were sailing a giant, floating cask of the one thing that stood between your crew and madness. But here is where the story gets even more desperate. Storing this mountain of water was only half the battle, because the water itself was alive, and it was rotting. By the time a crew was weeks from land, their most precious commodity was transforming into something monstrous. And the only man standing between them and a hold full of poison was the most overlooked genius of the age, the cooper. But that is for part 2. Welcome to the ship's true heart. Not the captain's quarters, not the gun deck. This dark, damp, and suffocating space, the water hold. Here, in the coolest part of the ship, often just above the bilge water, a stagnant soup of seawater, rat filth, and human waste, rested the cargo that meant life or death. Giant casks, some holding over 100 gallons each, were stacked like the organs of a wooden beast. And like any dark, wet, organic space aboard a ship, it was teeming with life. Forget crystal-clear mountain springs. The water a sailor drank after a month at sea was a biological stew. First, the algae. As light seeped into the hold, microscopic plants bloomed, turning the water the color of pea soup and giving it a thick, swampy smell. Then the bacteria. Without any sterilization, microbes multiplied by the billions, feeding on the wood itself and the algae. Many produced sulfurous gases, the smell of rotten eggs now mingled with the damp wood. And then the fauna. Tiny crustaceans like copepods and gribbles would infest the casks. Worse, translucent worms, nematodes, would thrive in the slime. Drinking wasn't just hydrating, it was a protein supplement. You didn't just taste the water, you chewed it. Now apply the gross factor. After 2 months in a wooden cask, this water was warm. It was viscous. It carried the earthy, fungal taste of the barrel itself, infused with the tannins of the oak. It was by any modern standard putrid, yet it was life. This constant low-grade nausea from their only water source was simply a part of daily existence, a cornerstone of the brutal truth of life at sea. And this is where we meet the unsung genius, the hidden hero of every successful voyage, the ship's cooper. While the captain navigated by the stars, the cooper waged a silent, critical war on another front, the war against leakage and rot. He was not just a barrel maker, he was a microbial strategist, a material scientist, and an emergency plumber. His first weapon, construction. A water cask wasn't just nailed together, it was an engineered puzzle. He used tight-grained white oak, less porous than red oak. The interior was charred with fire, a process that created a layer of activated carbon, which subtly filtered the water and, crucially, made the wood more resistant to rot. His second weapon, the bunghole. This small opening wasn't an afterthought, it was a maintenance port. Through it, the cooper would regularly inspect the water. He would rove the casks, driving the hoops tighter as the wood swelled and shrank. He would use moss or straw as caulking to seal leaks. A cooper's skill was measured in drops saved per day. In a crisis, he was the difference between survival and disaster. A sprung stave could drain a vital cask in hours. The cooper's kit contained emergency patches, spare staves, and a mind that understood wood and water pressure under chaos. When a captain looked at his water report, he wasn't just reading numbers. He was reading the cooper's skill. A good cooper was worth his weight in Spanish silver because he safeguarded the weight of the ship itself. So, how did they make this swamp juice palatable? They didn't. They masked it. This practice was called sweetening the water, and it was an exercise in psychological warfare against their own senses. The most common method? Vinegar or wine. A splash of acid could cut through the slimy texture and overpower the sulfurous smell. It didn't make the water safe, it made it drinkable without gagging. Another method, fire purifying. Dropping a red-hot cannonball or fire-heated iron into a cask. The sizzle and steam were dramatic. It might kill some surface bacteria, but it primarily cooked the algae and worms, turning them from wriggling horrors into a kind of briny, proteinaceous sediment at the bottom of the cask. Let's be clear, none of these methods made the water safe or healthy. They made it tolerable. This was the essence of managing the constant crisis. You weren't drinking to thrive. You were drinking to not die today. The chronic, low-grade stomach ailments, the persistent weakness, these were written off as seasickness or the miasma of the hold. In reality, it was the toll of consuming a slowly spoiling, contaminated liquid day after day for months on end. So the stage is set. A ship is a carefully balanced ecosystem of desperation. It carries a finite, decaying supply of the one thing its crew cannot do without. But what happens when the casks run low? Or when the sweetened water runs out? The men of the age of sail didn't just drink water. Their entire liquid diet, from the beer they woke up to the rum that put them to sleep, was a calculated, often alcoholic, strategy to survive their own thirst. That strategy, and the shocking pirate paradox that gave outlaws a hidden advantage, is where we head next. If you think a pirate's first thought in the morning was rum, you're centuries off. The true staple of the maritime diet, from cabin boy to captain, was beer. Specifically, small beer, a low-alcohol, lightly hopped brew that was less a beverage and more liquid bread. This was the workhorse of hydration. A typical ration could be a gallon per man per day. Why? Because the process of brewing, boiling the water, then fermenting it, killed most pathogens. In a world where plain water rotted in weeks, beer remained potable for months. The alcohol content, usually under 3%, was too low to cause drunkenness, but acted as a mild preservative. Here's the brutal truth in your tin cup. You started your 18-hour workday already slightly buzzed, consuming hundreds of calories of weak beer, not to get drunk, but to avoid the bloody flux and dehydration. Your life depended on a steady, mild intoxication. But beer took up space, and it too would eventually spoil on a long tropical voyage. The British Royal Navy, that vast global police force, needed a more robust solution. In 1740, Admiral Edward Vernon, nicknamed Old Grog for his grogram cloth cloak, issued the most influential order in drinking history. The daily rum ration would be diluted. Thus, grog was born. The standard issue. half a pint of overproof rum mixed with a quart of water, and later, a squeeze of lime juice to mask the taste of the iron-laden water. This was served at noon in sacred daily ritual. This was not kindness. This was biochemical crowd control. The water was often foul, the rum made it palatable. The lime juice, unbeknownst to them, fought scurvy. But most importantly, the alcohol was metered out by the establishment. It prevented sailors from hoarding their weekly rum ration and going on a destructive binge. It kept them in a state of manageable, loyal stupor. The Navy didn't just run on empire, it ran on a carefully administered damp addiction. And here we arrive at the first layer of the pirate paradox. Pirates were outlaws, unshackled from Navy discipline. Their famous articles often stipulated fair shares of loot and liquor. While a Navy sailor got a precise half pint of watered-down rum, a pirate following a prize could gorge on undiluted French brandy, Spanish wine, or fine Portuguese rum. But this wasn't just about debauchery. It was a logistical loophole. Alcohol, especially wine and spirits, was sterile, compact, and nearly immortal. A cask of brandy didn't putrefy. It was hydrating calories in a preservative. By plundering a merchant ship's hold, pirates weren't just stealing luxury, they were capturing a superior, long-lasting hydration system. They could drink the water from a prize ship first, then use the stronger spirits to supplement their own failing supplies. Their freedom allowed them to solve the quality problem through sheer, ruthless acquisition. But even pirates faced the dreaded calm. When the wind died and the ship sat roasting on a glassy sea for weeks, the math turned deadly. The beer was gone. The grog ration was cut. Now survival hinged on macabre ingenuity. First, rain. A tropical squall was a divine event. Every possible surface, sails, tarps, even men's oilskin coats, became a catchment system. The first minutes of rain would wash the salt and bird filth from sails. This foul water was discarded. Then the sweet water was collected. It was the closest thing to purity they'd tasted in months. Second, dew. In certain climates, crews would painstakingly wipe the morning dew from the rails and sails with cloths, wringing them out over buckets. It was a Sisyphean task for mere pints of water. Third, the last resort. This is where the line between man and beast blurred. In the Pacific, tortoises were captured alive and stacked on deck as living food. When thirst became critical, a tortoise's throat was cut, and the crew would drink its blood and the fluid from its bladder. It was salty, warm, and metallic, a horrific parody of the sea they were trapped on. They were literally draining the life from another creature to postpone their own death. This constant, grinding thirst did not just wither the body, it unmade the mind. The medical term is psychogenic polydipsia, a thirst so profound it creates vivid hallucinations. Sailors would see phantom lakes on the horizon, hear running water in the hold. The most disciplined men would be found secretly sipping seawater at night, knowingly poisoning themselves in a moment of delusional hope. This is why the daily grog ration or beer issue was about more than fluid. It was a psychological anchor. It was a predictable moment of relief in an unpredictable hell. To take it away was to invite mutiny faster than any whipping. A captain's authority wasn't just backed by cannon, it was measured out in pints. Control the drink, control the crew. So the pirate's menu was a hierarchy of desperation, from the daily beer to the strategic grog to the plundered wine, down to the bloody torture of a tortoise. But this reveals an even greater paradox. All these liquids, the beer, the grog, the rum, were just stopgaps. They were what you drank while searching for the real prize, because the ultimate solution to thirst wasn't stored in the hold at all. It was hidden in secret places on maps, guarded by nature itself. The most successful pirates weren't just the best fighters, they were the best hydrologists. They weren't just running from the law, they were running towards the next freshwater source. And that chase would reshape the map of the world. Forget the maps of empire that show routes for gold and spice. The true map of the age of sail, the one etched into the mind of every captain who valued his life, was a map of thirst. Longitude and latitude were one thing, but the most critical coordinates were for fresh water. A voyage wasn't plotted from London to Jamaica. It was plotted from Portsmouth to the Azores, 10 days to water, then Azores to the Eastern Caribbean, 3 more weeks, then a desperate dash to a known river mouth on a lawless shore. The ship was a giant wooden lung that needed to surface for water at regular intervals, or it suffocated. The ocean wasn't a highway, it was a desert, and these watering holes were the only oases. Land ho did not mean safety. It meant the beginning of the most perilous operation of the voyage, the watering party. This was a military expedition. A third of the crew might go, armed with muskets and cutlasses. Their mission, to haul hundreds of empty, heavy casks upstream to where the water ran fresh, fill them, roll them back through sand and surf, load them into longboats, and ferry them to the ship, all under the threat of attack. From whom? Rival European powers who might contest the territory, indigenous warriors defending their land and resources, or most feared of all, other pirates lying in wait, knowing a ship engaged in watering was at its most vulnerable, its crew split, its boats away, its attention divided. This scene reveals a core tenet of the pirate paradox. Here at the water's edge, the outlaws often had the advantage. A Navy ship was on a schedule, bound by orders to be at a certain place at a certain time. They couldn't afford a prolonged skirmish at a watering hole. But pirates, they were flexible. They could choose remote, hidden coves known only to them. They could wait out arrival. They could fight for a spring without having to explain a delay to an admiralty board. Their lack of bureaucracy was a logistical superpower. And this leads to the ultimate expression of the paradox. When pirates boarded a prize, what was the first thing they looted? Often it was the water. A merchant ship out of Europe, only a few weeks into its journey, would have water that was relatively fresh. Its beer would be stronger and sweeter. Its hold might contain cider or wine. For a pirate crew living on the edge of their own supplies, this wasn't a luxury, it was a survival upgrade. Pirate articles of agreement frequently stipulated that essential supplies, powder, shot, sailcloth, medicine, and water were to be taken before the loot was even tallied. They were resupplying their life support system. In that moment, the merchant ship wasn't just a treasure chest, it was a delivery of crisp, clean-ish drinking water. The pirate wasn't just a robber, he was a patient in a desert, raiding a water truck. This is where pirate strategy ascended from tactic to infrastructure. The famous pirate havens, Tortuga, Port Royal, Nassau, weren't chosen just for their loose women and lax laws. They were chosen because they had reliable, abundant fresh water. Pirates didn't just hide in these places, they fortified the water sources. They built cisterns, guarded wells, and maintained these liquid lifelines as their most critical communal asset. A pirate port without a spring was a ghost town. This was territorial control over hydration. In a world where empires fought over sugar and tobacco, the pirate republics were unconsciously fighting a more fundamental war, the war for aqueous security. So, let's reframe the pirate's life through the lens of thirst. They weren't just chaotic marauders. They were highly adaptive specialists in survival logistics. Their freedom allowed them to be better hunters for water, more flexible in its acquisition, and more ruthless in its protection than the rigid empires they preyed upon. They understood the brutal truth better than anyone. On the open ocean, water was the only treasure that couldn't be spent, only consumed. And the final cost of this endless hunt for drink wasn't measured in doubloons, but in the bodies and minds of the men who sailed. The consequences of managed dehydration were waiting in the shadows, with a disease more terrifying than any enemy broadside. Thirst never traveled alone. Its most faithful, deadly companion was scurvy, and the two worked in a vicious synergy. A dehydrated body cannot efficiently use what little nutrients it has. The lack of fresh water accelerated the onset of scurvy's horrors. And scurvy, with its symptoms of lethargy and open sores, made men less able to perform the arduous work of catching rain or hauling water casks. But the link was more profound. The primary symptom of advanced scurvy is an all-consuming, unquenchable thirst. It's a cruel biological joke. The very disease caused by their rotten diet made them crave the one thing they could never get enough of. A sailor in the grips of scurvy would drink his daily ration and feel more parched than before. He was trapped in a feedback loop of despair, his body screaming for a cure that was, ironically, often floating just beneath him in the form of fresh fish and citrus. If only they had known to look. Half pint of slime tomorrow. Then not. He's sailing us past the quay for his orders. For his orders. While we drink the bilge. Historians often cite tyranny or withheld pay as the seeds of mutiny. But dig into the logs, and you'll find the root cause was often far more basic: water, or the lack thereof. This was the dry mutiny. When captain, often bound by rigid Navy schedules, chose to bypass a known watering hole to make better time or pursue an enemy, he was gambling with his crew's most fundamental trust. A cut to the grog ration was a direct cut to morale and perceived survival. A crew could endure floggings, bad food, and low pay, but the moment they believed their captain was mismanaging their thirst, his authority evaporated. The mutiny on the HMS Bounty wasn't just about Bligh's cruelty. It was sparked during a lengthy, torturous attempt to circumnavigate the globe without adequate watering stops, pushing men past the limit of dehydration. The end of this centuries-long crisis didn't come from a new discovery at sea, but from industrialization on land. The 19th century brought two revolutions. First, iron tanks. Impervious to worms and rot, they could be cleaned. They didn't impart flavor. They ended the Cooper's ancient war against leakage overnight. Second, and most profound, steam. With steam engines came the power to desalinate. Early shipboard distillation plants could, albeit inefficiently, turn seawater into fresh. For the first time in human history, a ship could carry the potential for infinite water within its own hull. The ocean's greatest irony was finally solved by engineering. The sailor's existential terror was tamed by a coil of copper tubing and coal. So, what is the final tally of this endless thirst? It shaped geography. Islands were settled not for gold, but for the springs they held. It shaped naval strategy. Battles were fought over harbors with fresh water access. It shaped language. Scuttlebutt, the water cask, became slang for gossip because that's where men gathered to talk. To be 3 sheets to the wind came from a loss of control when the ropes, sheets, managing the sails were loose, a perfect metaphor for a man who drunk his grog ration too fast. And it shaped the pirates' paradoxical advantage. Their freedom from schedules, their network of secret wells, and their policy of linking water first gave them a resilience that rigid, hierarchical navies lacked. The brutal truth was a universal burden, but the outlaws had carved out a better way to bear it. We look at this now and see nothing. A commodity. A right. But for 4 centuries, this simple glass of water dictated empires, fueled mutinies, and defined the line between life and death for millions of men on the high seas. The story of sailing isn't just a story of wind and conquest. It's a story of a desperate, grinding thirst. The pirates, the navies, the merchants, they weren't heroes or villains in this story. They were all patients trying to manage a chronic condition with the crude tools they had: wood, alcohol, and violence. They didn't conquer the sea. They negotiated with it day by day, sip by putrid sip. And in that negotiation, the pirate, the flexible, amoral, acquisitive outlaw, often held the better cards. Not because he was stronger, but because he was free to prioritize his survival over king, country, or company ledger. They didn't find El Dorado. They were searching for something far more precious, the next drink. So what's the most shocking truth here? That pirates were master hydrologists? That the British Navy ran on controlled alcoholism? Or that the simple act of drinking water was once the most dangerous gamble a person could take at sea? Let me know in the comments. If you want to dive deeper into the hidden systems that built our world, the brutal, ingenious, and often disgusting truths behind history's greatest adventures, then you know what this channel is for. Hit subscribe. The past is thirsty for you to understand it.